Welcome to Svarim V'Sofrim. Today we're going to have a fascinating shir, and I can assure you it's something you have never heard before. You may doubt if this is actually true, if it's real. What I would suggest that you do is go back to our early shiurim, where we talk about the difference between Sfard and Ashkenaz. We have part 1 and we have part 2, the difference between Sfard and Ashkenaz. Each one of these shiurim are approximately 1 hour long, and listen carefully to the shir. Find out the difference in the overview or the perspective of what it means to learn Gemara in the view of Rashi. We know Rashi on the Gemara, and the difference between the Rambam. You will be very surprised. Let me say, you'll be semi-surprised if you listen to the first 2 shiurim. You'll be very surprised if you are just tuning in right now and listening to this one shir. So I'd just like to tell you also that I am planning for the next shiurim, the next who knows how many shiurim, and I think we're going to start calling it a different name. Instead of Svarim V'Sofrim, which means, of course, the Svarim, the books that the Gedolei Yisrael wrote, and the Sofrim, they themselves, the authors, giving a background about them. Instead, we are going to do something which, in essence, is my passion concerning Svarim V'Sofrim, and that is, we will be calling it a smicha primer. In other words, when someone wants to obtain smicha, a typical yeshiva student, they've been in the system for many, many years. The focus of that chinuch is generally learning Gemara. You have Rashi, you have the Gemara, you have Rashi, you have Tosfos, you have the Marsha, you have the classic Mefarshim, and then all of a sudden we open up a Shulchan Aruch, and Shulchan Aruch is a new world, a new world which could be daunting, which is daunting for me personally. When I studied Smicha many years ago, I did not have the proper introduction to it. I don't know, there are probably nowadays different systems, different opportunities. However, let's bring this up again. However, right now, it would be best if we have a proper introduction towards the new world of Shulchan Aruch with all its mefarshim. So that's what we will be doing in Mirz Hashem. In the Smicha, we're going to be changing the name of this. Instead of Svarim V'Sofrim, we'll be calling it the Smicha Primer. As usual, we will be using 2 tools in order to help us with this shir, and one is called Otzer HaChochma, and the other one is the Bar Ilan. Each one, as we explained in the past, has its milas, its advantages and disadvantages. So we'll be using both Bar Ilan and Otzer HaChochma for this. So once again, what we have here is the outlook. What does it mean, or what is the purpose of learning Gemara? And it seems clear that there is a difference between the outlook of Rashi and the outlook of Rambam. Before I even begin with this, I'd also like to tell you that one thing in common over here is the picture. That both pictures that we're used to, one of Rashi and one of the Rambam, are false pictures. They're fake pictures. They are not true. We do not know how Rashi looked. Nobody knows today. Nobody living today knows how Rashi looked, and nobody living today knows how the Rambam looked. However, these pictures is what we associate Rashi and the Rambam with, and that for that reason we are using the picture. Another thing that I like to say is that I have here, what I'm going to be using today is the Sefer called Hamavo L'Sifrei HaRambam, the introduction for the works of the Rambam. This is also, by the way, posted, and if you would like to get a PDF of that Sefer, just email me at info@shazak.com. Once again, that's info@shazak.com. Let's begin with looking to see what the association of the Rambam and Rashi were, or actually when they lived. I could tell you right now, when they lived, Rashi lived before the Rambam. Rashi lived around 100 years before the Rambam. Let's just go over here. We'll use Wikipedia, and we're gonna see over here Rashi. Rashi lived in France. He lived at a time in Germany from 1040, let's say, till 1105. Now we go to the Rambam, and the Rambam lived, hopefully it says 1038. Hopefully 1038 that he was, 1138 that he was born. Yes, it does. We have a lot of people who are using 1135, which is incorrect. If you look into the Sefer Hamavo L'Sifrei Rambam, you look at the early chapters, you'll see that the Rambam was definitely born, according to his own words, at the end of Pirush HaMishnayos, at the end of Uktzin. It's clear that the Rambam was born in 1138, not 1135. Regardless, we see the difference between the Rambam and Rashi is around 100 years. But, of course, there's stories all over the place that are made-up stories about the Rambam. For example, and this I actually recently heard, that they tell this fable, which is a fable, it's not true, that the Rambam as a young person was very, very weak in his learning. And you have a whole story revolving that. It's categorically not true. What we have to understand is when it comes to stories, the default of these stories written about these great people from thousands of or hundreds of years ago is it's not true. It's not true. You want to tell us a story, you have to bring some proof. You have to bring a proper source for the story. And we're not going to get into that right now, but it's very disheartening that these stories, just the fact saying that the Rambam was a very weak learner when he was a young child, there's absolutely no truth to that story. There's another story about how Rashi met the Rambam. That's so interesting because they lived 100 years apart from each other. The Rambam lived in Mitzrayim. He was born in Spain. He lived four decades in Egypt. And Rashi's in Germany, and Rashi's in France, way before him. So, the difference between Rashi and the Rambam in the outlook to Gemara is the same difference between, as we said before, the difference between Sfard and Ashkenaz. The difference is that in Sfard, let's go back, in Sfard, in Spain we could also include that the Middle East, the outlook of Gemara is in order to reach a halacha, in order to get the verdict of the psak din, in order that we should know how to live as Jews. You have to have in mind that in those days, in the lives of the Rashi and Rambam, we really did not have any Shulchan Aruch, so to say. Of course, the Rambam wrote Mishnah Torah, but that was really the first thing, that we have comprehensive code of Jewish law. But before that, there was no such thing. So therefore, when it comes to Gemara, as we explained before, the difference between Sfard and Ashkenaz, starting with the Rif Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, who was before the Rambam. The Rambam's teacher was Maimon. Maimon's teacher was the Rimigash. The Rimigash teacher was the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi. Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, the Rif, is just a summary of the Gemara, clearing all the Shakla Vitaria, all the give and take, and coming straight to the halacha. So once again, the purpose of learning the Gemara is in order to reach a halacha. The Gemara often does not tell us, or most of the time does not tell us what the halacha is like. So therefore, you need really a good understanding of the Gemara in order to get the halacha. That is Sfard. In Ashkenaz, on the other hand, as we explained, it is the experience. It's not the reaching the halacha, which you could say is so important. In the words of the Maharal, which we mentioned before, it could be two different people are learning the Gemara. One person is really striving to understand the Gemara, reaches one particular conclusion regarding the halacha, and the other one reaches a different conclusion. In the eyes, says the Maharal, in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Hashem Yisbarach, both are valid. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. What Hashem has nachas from, like we say regarding Karbanas, nachas ruach lefanei, shamarti v'nasa ritzaini, the nachas ruach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the fact that both toiled learning Hashem's Torah. V'gisa ba'yayman v'layla. That is the idea of Ashkenaz. So the halacha itself is, so to say, not as important. Let me go over here. By the way, in Eitzer HaChachma, you have, it's unbelievable. I keep on finding new things concerning Eitzer HaChachma. So let me just double click over here, and I'm opening up a Gemara, and using these buttons here in the Gemara, we could see they have a tremendous edition of the Gemara, and they're using it's Friedberg's Gemara, beautiful. I think it's Friedberg. I'm not sure exactly, but a beautiful edition of the Gemara, print of the Gemara, and here we find in the Gemara. Let me just go back here. Okay, here we go. We find in the Gemara, I'm going to make it a bit larger, and this is what the Gemara is. You have Rashi you have the Rashi, and you have Tosfos. The way that it works in the actual Gemara is that Rashi's on the inside, and Tosfos is on the outer side. If you turn the page, you get to Amid Beis, so then it switches. So Tosfos becomes on the outside, and Rashi's the inside. Someone once explained to me, I don't know if it's true, but why the printers did it like this was, number one, because Rashi is essential for the Gemara. You can't really learn the Gemara without Rashi. So the way that it worked, especially in the olden days, is the Gemara was very, very extremely expensive. Could be some communities didn't even own an entire Shas. And there was problems that as time progressed, the Gemara itself got, so to say, eaten up by worms. So therefore, if anything should be eaten up, it could be Tosfos. Let Tosfos suffer. At least you're still going to have the Gemara and you're still going to have Rashi. So that's why Rashi was always on the inside. So that is one explanation. Another explanation, and it is true, I don't think that's the reason why Rashi was printed in the inside, but the very fact when we try to understand the difference between Rashi and Tosfos is that Rashi is telling us, is focusing on understanding what the Gemara says. That is Rashi. Tosfos, on the other hand, says, okay, Pirish Rashi, by the way, Tosfos were the descendants of Rashi. Pirish Rashi, Rashi says like this, however, how can you say such a thing? Because, and citing all these different Gemaras all over the place throughout Shas in order to understand the Gemara. So that's what Tosfos does. Could you still understand Tosfos without could you still understand the Gemara without Tosfos? 100% you could understand. So Rashi, you could say, is the Sarapnim. He's the internal minister. What does it mean when we say internal minister? We mean that he's focusing on internal affairs, here, specifically the Gemara. Tosfos, on the other hand, is the Sarachutz. He's the exterior minister. He's focusing, just like a Sarachutz deals with all problems globally. That's where he is. So that was Tosfos. So therefore, since Rashi is the Sarapnim, he's in the inside. Tosfos is the Sarachutz, and he's on the outside of the Gemara itself. Okay, so that is in a nutshell, and we enhance and we spoke a lot about the difference between Sfard and Ashkenaz. Let's take a look also at the layout of the Gemara. Back over here, we have the layout of the Gemara. And it seems to me that the layout is dominated by Ashkenaz. Not too much Sfard is prevalent over here. And let me explain. Rashi, France and Germany. Tosfos, France and Germany. You have some Tosfos also in England, but a minority. So that's number one, the bulk of what we have explaining the Gemara. Well, the Gemara itself is in Bavel. Nowadays it's modern Iraq. But the bulk is Ashkenaz. All right, what do we have here? Hagos Hagra, the Vilna Gaon, Ashkenaz. He's focusing on, at least the Vilna Gaon over here with Hagos Hagra, he's focusing on the words of the Gemara. In other words, if you don't know the words, if you don't have the proper nusach of the Gemara, you're in trouble. It's very difficult to understand the Gemara. So the Gra did that, and Hagos Habach. The Bach is Rabbi Yoel Sirkish. He's the author of Bayis Chadash, which is a commentary on the Tur, and that's opposite the Beis Yosef on one side, the Bayis Chadash, Rabbi Yoel Sirkish on the other side, and he is also from Ashkenaz, focusing on the Nusach of the Gemara. And then we go to Gilyon Hashas. Gilyon Hashas is Rabbi Akiva Eger. So Rabbi Akiva Eger, he has a few words here and there, but he could ask major questions just in a nutshell, and he really wants you to understand and learn in depth the Gemara. So he's giving you these few words here and there, and you have to figure it out yourself. That's really total Ashkenaz derech. Now, to such an extent, the Gilyon Hashas, or Akiva Eger, who lived in Posen, in maybe Poland or somewhere in Europe, right now, during the time we're in right now in the Corona age, in the COVID age, so he's quoted a lot because in 1831 there was a terrible Magefa, and the stance that he took, similar to what we have now, COVID. So there's a lot of talk about Rabbi Akiva Eger, fascinating person. To such an extent, the Gilyon Hashas, let's go just to another page here. Let's see if we could get it. So in Gilyon Hashas, to such an extent that there's a difference between when Rabbi Akiva Eger uses the expression, tzarech ian or tzarech ian gadol. That is really important, okay? To such an extent. In other words, if Rabbi Akiva Eger is saying tzarech ian, we have to look into it, that's one level.
And when he says Sarchian Gadol, that means another level completely. So we have pretty much, besides Reb Nissen Gaon over here is printed, Lukutei Rashi, it gives us another Rashi, a different place. But the Gemara here is dominated by Ashkenaz. Comes along a person, and Taira Ashalim is when the Gemara references a pasuk. So here, Taira tells us where the pasuk is. In the new edition here, it's telling us, giving us the entire pasuk. And that's really important, parenthetically, by the way. Why is it so important? For some reason, the Gemara uses often, when it quotes a pasuk, it uses the word v'gaimer. V'gaimer means etc. And the v'gaimer is really the most important part of the proof of the pasuk. And since I don't know why it's like that, if somebody could let me know, info@shazak.com. Once again, let me know why that is. But here, with this edition, Torah Shalem, it brings you the whole pasuk. Always best to look up the source that we could understand in context. But if we're too lazy, myself included, at least we get the entire pasuk over here, which is not mentioned in the Gemara. It's only mentioned v'gaimer. So there we have. There is one person who was involved in printing. By the way, you have Mesiris Hashas here, Imai Safis, just giving you different references throughout the Gemaras, giving you different references to other Gemaras to look in. Something like, which will be very helpful when you're learning Taisvis also. Taisvis always talks about other Gemaras. Mesiris Hashas is the same thing. What we're going to focus on right now is that one exception whose name is Rabbi Yeshua Bayaz. I'm wondering if we put him in over here. Yeshua Bayaz, if anything's going to come up in English. Yes, it does. And if not, not really. Schultingem is a prominent K. When he was 23, he began to publish useful works on the Talmud. It doesn't tell us that much. By the way, when we look at the word Talmud, it seems to us that it's more of a modern term. We always say Gemara. Gemara this, we're learning Gemara. We don't call it Talmud. The fact of the matter, though, is Talmud is proper. Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi. It's interesting, you could look this up, it's interesting that the word Talmud was actually censored for some reason. Look it up yourselves. I don't even know what reason it is. And they changed it to Gemara. But in essence, the word is Talmud. Let me go now to the Hebrew one. I like that better. And at least here on the bottom he tells us, Mesiris Hashas ein mishpat ner mitzvah. But where was he from? He's from Spain, and maybe he settled in Italy. But he's definitely Sephardic. So let me look him up in Hebrew now. Yeshua Bayaz. There we go. And here we have where they give you actually a page of the Gemara, the Chibur of Rabbi Yeshua Bayaz, and Mesiris Hashas. We click over here, and we get Mesiris Hashas. And let me go back over here. When did he live? Let me go back here. Yeshua Bayaz, he died in 1557. So if we understand that the printing press was the late 1400s, so Yeshua Bayaz was involved in printing at the beginning stages, and he saw that there was a great need to have sources here regarding the halacha. And that really is what I'm going to focus on now, where we have this, so to say, lone Sephardi who says that it's important to figure out what is the halacha in the Gemara. Now, I learned in the Ashkenaz system, So my Rabbi or Rabbeim, they never pointed out something which I wish they would have. And that is, well, you want to know what the halacha is, so there's a very simple system in order to find out the halacha. You see it has here Lamed Vav, and it has here Aleph. All you have to, and it has here Aleph, so you have to find that Aleph on the page of the Gemara. Here it is. Asr Laila Adam Shiyavar Achure Beis HaKnesses B'Shas Shat Tzibor Mispalim. It's prohibited for a person to go in the back of the shul when the tzibur is davening. So that is the halacha that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says. Amar Abaye v'lo yamran deleka pischachrina v'ki pischachrina les lambav v'lo yamran el deleka beiknista. So it gets more involved and more involved. You really want to know what the halacha is. So going back over here. So this Rabbi Yeshua Boyaz, what he decided to do was to put a reference that if you want to know where in halacha you could find it, so here, I'm telling you, this is Lamed Vav, which is a continuation of the page before where you had Lamed Hey. Goes back to the beginning of Brachas, we're in Daf Chesam and Beis. So the beginning of the Gemara Brachas, you have Aleph. It starts with Aleph, and it keeps on going along. So this is what Rabbi Yeshua Boyaz does. He tells you. It's in Rambam. Mem Yod Yud, Maimonides, whatever you want to call it. But it's Rambam, Perek Vav, Mehochs Tefillah, Halacha, Aleph. Smag, Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos, Reb Moshe Mikutzi from France. Essen, it's in Mitzvahs Essay. Yotes, you're going to find it over there. Tur Shulchan Aruch, Arachaim Siman Tzadik, Sif Ches. Well, it says, either you could read it like this, I'm not sure which is correct. You could say Tur Shulchan Aruch because the name of Rabbi Yaakov, the son of the Rush, his Sefer, the Tur, is Tur Shulchan Aruch. But maybe he doesn't mention Shulchan Aruch over here. So maybe it's Tur Vish Shulchan Aruch. It's Tur and Shulchan Aruch. Well, they use the same categorization, so therefore it's Arachaim Siman Tzadik Seif Aleph. Or Seif Ches. You could find it over there. Okay, so that is Rabbi Yeshua Boyaz. Now, interesting. Often you have in Gemara a disagreement between Rav and Abaye, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. So if you really want to know what the halacha is like, so you look into where the letter is, from even without looking into the Gemara itself. Look where the letter is, and you could find who we paskin like. So if there's a Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, if you look where the letter is from Rabbi Yeshua Boyaz, from Mesiris, not from Mesiris Hashas, Rabbi Yeshua Boyaz, from Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah. I flipped the page so it's on the left side. So look where that letter is, and if it's by, let's say, Rava and Abaya, if it's by the words of Rava, you know that halacha is like Rava. If it's by the words of Abaya, you know that halacha is like Abaya. So the question is, why, when I'm going through the yeshiva system, nobody told me this? That would have been fascinating. So I also shared with you my experience when I'm first learning Gemara. It was Elam Metzias. So I'm spending so many days, so many hours and everything. Elam Metzias, and I'm just getting antsy, and I want to know what's the halacha. And my Rebbe is like pushing it off aside, like it's not important what the halacha is. Even at the end, pretty frustrating experience to say the least. But this is all because the system, the chinuch system that we're in, is Ashkenaz dominated. So Ashkenaz means it's not important, the halacha. You want the halacha later on, you become a rabbi. Later on, you look in Shulchan Aruch, you find out the halacha. It's the experience, it's the root, it's the journey which is really important. So here we have on the page of the Gemara, dominated by Ashkenaz, Rashi and Tosfos, and that's what we have over here. I'm going to the next thing, and this was a very important introduction. And the next tool that I'm going to be using is the Bar Ilan tool. So I have it up over here. Show you something pretty fascinating. Let me close this. I'm just going to show you my journey, how I got there. And we're talking now about how Rashi looked at the Gemara and how the Rambam looked at the Gemara. So we're going to go and I'll ask you a question. Think about it a little. I don't expect that you should have an answer to the question. We know that both Rashi and the Rambam were huge Talmidei Chachamim. That goes without saying. Now, Rashi lived 100 years before the Rambam. Rashi was in France, was in Germany. Now, Rashi wrote Pirush B'Kuntris, he wrote Kintresim. These Kuntresim, these pamphlets, were disseminated and ended up by a lot of people, became extremely popular. The question is, did the Rambam ever see Rashi? Not Rashi personally, but Rashi's Pirush, his explanation. Did Rashi ever see that? So, in order to answer the question, we have to look into the words of the Rambam. Well, I wrote the Sefer, Hamavi L'Sifrei Rambam, did extensive research, and not one time is Rashi mentioned in the works of the Rambam. If I'm wrong, info@shazak.com. Let me know. Not one time. So the question is, was the Rambam aware of Rashi and he chose to ignore? Or perhaps the Rambam located who was in Mitzrayim, even though he had a vast library, he never really saw Rashi. And that is controversial. And that is talked a lot about in scholarly works. But it's all speculation. The bottom line is that we don't know. I have my personal opinion, and I'll share with you my personal opinion. But before we get to my opinion, which take it or leave it, let's go and find out the flip side. Did Rashi and Tosfos, Rashi for sure never saw the works of the Rambam, but the Rashi's descendants, the Tosfos, who lived at the time of the Rambam and later, how about them? How did they regard Rambam, Mishnah Torah? It's so important. How could you even ignore it? So with the tool Bar Ilan that we have right now, what we're going to do is a search. Let's first of all, we're not going to search all databases. Let's choose our database. So I did choose, by the way, in Bar Ilan you have something called a catalog where you could find the sefer, you could search in that particular sefer. You want to have Tosfos, so actually I had to do that in order to find. So I just click over here. I got the green, and it's okay. Now I'm searching in Tosfos. So here you could see Rishonim, and I get over here Tosfos. I am searching amongst all the different mefarshim of the Gemara. These are classic mefarshim. You have. So I'm just going into Tosfos. There's no reason for me to include Rashi, because Rashi's not going to mention the Rambam. So here, let's take a look to see how many times does the Rambam come up in Tosfos. I press over here, and it comes up one time, Tosfos in Maseches Ksubas, Daf Pei Vav. I was pretty surprised when I saw that. I didn't expect that any Rambam will come up. However, as we could see, this is in parentheses and definitely added to Tosfos. I don't think Tosfos wrote it. There was one, and that's the reason why it's put in brackets here. Okay, because of V'chein Amad Debar, that's the way it is. Kiri, V'chein Rav Alphys, v'Rambam, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Avram, nir like Rabbeinu Tam, v'emes ki nira divrei Rabbeinu Tam. These words over here are so atypical. They're not typical whatsoever in Tosfos. This was definitely written not by the Baalei Tosfos, but was written by someone else. I have no idea who that was. Regardless, so we see from here that not one time is Rambam mentioned in the entire Tosfos, and that is absolutely 100% incorrect, because he is mentioned. He is mentioned one time. And I have to be proud of myself that I'm not a big Gemara learner, I have to admit. However, I know that the Rambam is mentioned by the Baalei Tosfos one time. And I can even tell you which daf. The Gemara says, Asay simanim l'Torah. You make signs for Torah. There are a couple places in the Gemara that I could impress people by saying, one time, and I always remember where that is. So the place is in Menachos, Daf Mem Beis. How do I know that? Because Menachos is Mem, Mem Beis is Beis Mem, so it's 3 letters of the Rambam. So one time in the Gemara, Mem stands for Menachos. Okay, it could stand perhaps for other Masechtas, but it's Menachos. For some reason I could remember Menachos. Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis. So there is one time that the Rambam's mentioned. Now you may be a little confused. What's going on over here? Because I typed in Rambam. How am I going to find it? Well, actually he's mentioned by a different name, which is Maimon. Okay, let me just go over here. Maybe they mentioned a different time. No. So there is a question also. How do you spell Maimon? Do you spell it with 1 yud or do you spell it with 2 yuds? Regardless, let's see if I'm right. Of course, yes. It is in Tosfos Menachos, Daf Mem Beis, Amid Beis, where he does mention the Rambam. V'chein Pirush Moshe ben Maimon, and it speaks about mezuzah loy boy lishma. Okay, so these are the words of the Gemara. Let me just do this over here, and I feel that it's important just to show you how these tools could be used. Well, you just click over here, you could find Tanakh, beautiful printing of that. You could find Mishnayos, beautiful printing. And I go to Shas, and it is sorted by order, not by alphabet, not by the Aleph base. So I'm going into Menachos, and I'm going to double click over here. As we said before, we're going to go now to Daf Mem Beis. Daf Mem Beis, Amid Beis. So before you saw in Bar Ilan, you saw words. Words is missing a little. It's just words. That's what it is. It's words. Now it becomes familiar for us. Now we have Tzuras Hadaf. Now we can look at the actual picture of the Gemara. So we're looking over here. I'm trying to find Tosfos. Let's see what daf I'm in. I'm in Mem Beis Amid Aleph. Now I'm Mem Beis Amid Beis. I'm going in to the same words that we had in Bar Ilan. And Tfilin Yesh Lahem Bedika Pirush Bekuntris Avol Svarm Zuz Loi Bayi Ben Lishman V'chein Pirush Harav Reb Moshe Bar Maimon, bottom of the page, the Mezuzah Loi Bayi Lishma. Now, Tosfos was written by 300 Baalei Tosfos. Which one exactly is this? I'm not sure. So it says one time in the entire Gemara that's mentioned the Rambam's name, and however, there is, after mentioning what the Rambam holds, the Mezuzah Loi Bayi Lishma, if you look into Mishnah Torah, so right away, what's the comment? For Loi Pirush Minale. He's missing something. It's missing the Rambam telling us, how does he know that? Now, with the words of Loi Pirush Minale, we have a major complaint against the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah that it's lacking the Gemara part of it. He's just telling you the halacha without too much additional, without sufficient, rather, information. So right away, that one place in Tosfos where he does mention, right away telling you something wrong. V'loi pirish minole. V'shema, and maybe mihacha. Now they're going to go into their speculation, which is very much like the Gemara itself does. So what we see from here is the Rambam ignored Rashi and Tosfos, and Tosfos ignored the Rambam. Tosfos was, at least some Baalei Tosfos were aware of the Rambam Sefer, and they chose to ignore it, to not include it over here. Why is that? What's the difference? Now, we also know that the Rambam had an extensive library, a very extensive library. The Rambam talks about, when it comes to in Moreh Nevuchim, he talks about, I think this is a letter, he says, there's not one book, not Sefer, there's not one book of Avodah Zarah that I'm not familiar with. That's what the Rambam wrote. He had extensive. So lahavdil, if that's the case by Avodah Zarah books, I mean books that talk about Avodah Zarah. By the way, it's not that the Rambam was totally immersed in Avodah Zarah, but that was a major theme of the Rambam. In order to understand, to write halacha concerning Avodah Zarah, you had to be an expert in it. So that's what the Rambam writes. I think it's in Likutei Sichos Chelik Yud. There's a pretty famous sikha about Hanukkah, and saying there are two aspects to Hanukkah. I'm just going to say it in a nutshell. Two aspects to Hanukkah. One aspect is l'hodes u'lahalal, and that has to do with the ness of the shemen. And another aspect, which is the mishta part of it. According to the Levush, it's obligatory, or it's not obligatory, but it's proper to make a seuda on Hanukkah, and that is to commemorate the physical aspect that we're winning the war. So anyways, the Rebbe says that the Rambam does it in two separate halachas because he's focusing on these two aspects. But where does the Rambam get the idea that we also have to celebrate the physical aspect of it? So just a quick note that the Rebbe says, and I happen to have been at that for bringing, maybe I'm aging myself, the Rebbe says that perhaps the Rambam had a sefer that we don't have today. The Rambam had an extensive library. Just to give you in a nutshell, for sure he had. And for sure, at least in my opinion, I said back to my opinion, there's no doubt in my mind that the Rambam was aware of Pirush Rashi. He was aware of Pirush Tosfos, at least that was up to his particular time. This is all my opinion. However, the Rambam looked at it and he says, okay, but that's not my thing. I could understand the Gemara without Rashi. I have a deep understanding of Gemara. I don't need Rashi to help me understand the Gemara. The way that I approach Gemara is using the Gemara in order to reach halacha. I am doing all the work for you. You do not have to do it yourself. It's not the journey, it's the outcome. Very, very Sephardic. So that's why I think the Rambam did see Rashi. I don't think he focused much on Rashi, on Pirush Rashi. Okay, so now, based on that, let's see if we could even find a Mishnah in Gemara. We're going to see two different approaches concerning the Gemara itself, and that will be more focused on Mishnah. So I'm just going over here. Hopefully I'm going to get to a Mishnah. And we find often anybody who learned Gemara, here we have a Mishnah. Let's see where we have Rashi in the Mishnah. Not doing too well with Menachos over here. But here we have a Mishnah, and we have in Rashi, I could just say it because it's all over the place. When it comes to a Mishnah, and right away you're learning the Mishnah and you want to know, okay, what's pshat in the Mishnah? So immediately, if you're going to look into Rashi, you're going to see that Rashi is going to tell us Bigmara Mefarish La, that the Gemara is going to explain it. And that's all over the place, even though I'm not doing such a great job here in Menachos showing you that. But anyone who learned Gemara will attest to it. Well, let's use Bar Ilan to show you that. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to do a search. We are not going to search all databases, but what we're going to do is we're going to choose our database, and it's going to be in Mefarshei Habavli. Let me restart everything. It's going to turn red. Let me go over here to Mefarshei Rashi, Mefarshei Gemara, and I'm going to go into Rashi. So we're only going to get a search result in Rashi, and let's type in Big Gemara Mefarish. Less is better. So how many do we get over here? All over the place. 450 Gemara, Big Gemara Mefarish, Big Gemara Mefarish. Maybe Rashi uses different expressions also, but here we have. Let's just click on this. So we have in the Mishnah, Val Taiva Mein Al Hara Taiva Meitiv Ubi Gemara Mefarish La. In the Gemara, we'll explain it. So what we see from here, from all these places, and it's usually on the Mishnah, Big Gemara Mefarish La. It's almost exclusively on the Mishnah. Big Gemara. In other words, you're learning the Mishnah right away. You're going to have a question. So Rashi's here to the rescue, and Rashi is telling us, Big Gemara Mefarish. The Gemara is going to explain it. Okay? So, what Rashi is telling us is that a person is learning the Mishnah. Mishnah itself is not independent. Not independent whatsoever. In other words, if you're really, not if, in order to understand the Mishnah, you need to go to the Gemara. But Rashi also understands that he's learning with you, he's holding your hand, he's learning with you Gemara the first time. So he tells you, Big Gemara Mefarish La. The Gemara is going to tell you, so hold your horses. I know you have a question over here, but Big Gemara Mefarish La. Don't worry about it. The Gemara is going to explain that to you. So that's what we have in the Gemara so far. What we mentioned before, just a recap. Gemara is dominated by Ashkenaz, dominated by Rashi Tosfos, by the Bach, by by the way, Shita Mekubetzes is not Bitzal Ashkenazis and Tzvas and everything Sephardi, but there's an exception. But dominated pretty much by Ashkenaz Rabbi Kiva Eger, surrounding. Shuabaya is the printer from Sfard, originally from Sfard, and is in Italy. It's important he's in Italy. Italy was all the printing presses. He tells you, go back to the Gemara. Very, very Sephardic thing to do. So that's what we had until now. And also the idea that Rashi and Rambam lived in different eras, different times. And Rambam probably saw a few contrasim of Rashi, and I don't think he was very interested in that. Okay, so if you have a problem with that, great. That's fantastic. Think about it. Think about it, learn it. By the way, now we're going to go to the next step over here. And we have, Baruch Hashem, we have over here the Rambam, and that's Mishnah Torah. We have, pretty interesting, we're going to get to that later at a different time, we have something called Pirush. Who's this Pirush all about? Who writes it? But in general, you have Kesef Mishnah, you have Magid Mishnah, you have Lechem Mishnah, Mishnah Lamelech, Migdolais, everything. Each one is fascinating in their own right. Okay, so that's Mishnah Torah. As we said, Mishnah Torah is telling you what the halacha is. The Rambam says at the beginning of his Sefer, the Rambam says, use my Mishnah Torah and you don't need any other Sefer. Use my Sefer. That's what the Rambam says. Now what does it mean? You don't need any other Sefer. So perhaps you could say, just like we were saying until now, that you don't need any other Sefer. I learned the Gemara for you, and the main thing is to get the halacha, and here you have it. You have everything over here in Mishnah Torah, so therefore you don't need any other Sefer. That's the Hakdama.